Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. If you're just now joining us, you're watching Zeitgeist Live. Joining me now is Mr. Ariel Von Raven. He is one of our presenters, actually I would say workshop presenters, at our Z-Day event coming up on Saturday. If you are just now joining us, you can just Google Austin Z-Day and find out more information upon that. But Ariel's here and he's going to talk to us. He's going to give us a little bit of an idea on what we can expect at his workshop and you know, what's going on in his world right now. Ariel, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Of course.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, man, excellent. So if you would, give us a little bit of background about yourself and how you got involved with growing food.
Sure, yeah, it's kind of a funny story. A very roundabout way of getting there. I studied math in school, first of all, so that tells you something was going on in my brain that wasn't normal. Yeah. But my sister worked on an organic biodynamic farm for years and years and years, and so I grew up around it. And so I grew up being able to, eat food fresh from the vine, pluck a tomato ripe, cool. Eat it right there. And that experience stayed with me for a long time. And then I got really into different types of food, different types of diets. It culminated in raw foodism. And what I noticed happening in raw foodism is that my world changed. Things happen without me taking the first step. In other words, the food that I was eating, you are what you eat, that's a fundamental principle of life, is that, well, it's true. And when I was eating really highly vibrant, vital food and nutritious food, things started changing in my life that was phenomenal. And then some more time went on, and I realized that, you can go to the store, you get mangoes, you get bananas, you get all these things that a raw foodist might eat, avocados even, and it's really hard to find a good mango. I loved mangoes growing up. I just can't find a good mango anymore. And I realized, going back to all those days on my sister's farm, eating the tomato fresh off the vine, that was the best. Right. The fresh food right from the farm. That's the good stuff.
Well, I mean, you're a farmer. You work out at Cypress Valley Farms. So I mean, you know what you're talking about. Why is it that that food was better than the food that you're getting at the supermarket?
Okay, so supermarket foods travel anywhere from 12 to 15 to even 2,500 miles to get to the supermarket. And for that tomato to be ripe when it arrives at the supermarket and for it to stay good until it goes to your table and then ultimately into your stomach, they have to pick it anywhere from 20 to 30 days early. And so there's some really interesting research done at Texas A&M, College Station, our own Texas blood, and they found that just with tomatoes that
how about that?
In the last week on the vine, a tomato will get 50% of its nutrition.
Wow.
So vine-ripened tomatoes were 50% more nutritious than green tomatoes.
Unripened tomatoes.
Right.
Right.
So it doesn't take much to draw the inference from there and to think about that, well, if those tomatoes got that much more in that last week, what about everything else?
Right.
So obviously having food you can go pick, you can eat right from the plant is going to be your best source of nutrition, hands down.
And this nutrition, when you say that, when you were really getting into eating really highly vibrant, nutritious food, things started changing in your life. Things started, by changing, you mean just things started getting easier for you? Like life, just your overall state of being and your energy? You had more vibrance in your own life, which caused you to have more exciting interactions with your world?
All of the above.
Right on.
Yes. Okay. Short answer. Yeah, there's a lot of manifestation ideas tied into this for the people who have watched The Secret or down the rabbit hole, all that stuff. What the bleep? You know, that was a big, you know, shifting point when it basically took all these ideas that I had been having and put them all in, like, you know, 2 hours, and I was like, whoa, okay,
cool.
Yeah, we're going somewhere. And so suddenly those things started happening faster.
Right.
You know, I would be like, man, it would be really great if I could, you know, do this today. And then suddenly I meet the right person to make that happen, and everything just flows.
Sure.
And
yeah, you know, I mean, I'm a big law of attraction believer, and you know, when you follow your passion, synchronicity just starts showing up in your life. And so if you're becoming passionate about raw, living foods, all of a sudden, when you really started committing toward this passion, like taking active steps to make it what you do, you know, part of your daily life, like career-wise, if you want to think about it, that's when all these magical things started happening, which is great. Now, what would you say? What's the difference between, you know, between, like, not you, but let's say, because I know you're working on generative food production?
Yes.
That's what you call it? And say, like, somebody who has an ag degree from Texas A&M.
Okay, so the label that, if I were to put a label on it, I would call it generative food systems. And you could break down each one of those words. Generative, you know, a lot of people talk about sustainable industry, sustainable food production, sustainable this, the sustainability movement. That's really powerful. It's, you know, there are farms in China that have been producing food for 4,000 years on the same plot of land. That's truly sustainable food development. You know, we came to America, we started farming, 80 years later, the Great Dust Bowl, so on and so forth.
Oh yeah.
And we all know the story, or a good bit of it.
Yeah.
So that's sustainable food production. And the reason why—
It's sustainable in China, what they're doing, that's sustainable food production?
In some, you know, localized farms.
Got it, okay.
That's an example that say that, okay, this farm has been running for 4,000 years, that's sustainable.
I see what you're saying, yeah, because they intelligently manage the crop rotation and things like this. Like
and they understand the system, which we'll get to it in just a moment.
Okay.
So I use the word generative to really portray and bring across the fact that we're in America and we've depleted the soil. So what we need to do now is we need to bring life back into the soil. When settlers first came to America, we had 12 feet of topsoil.
Sure.
You know, now we have a few inches to maybe 2 feet in some of the richest areas. It does. It does.
Soil needs a break.
And it needs the circuit to be completed.
It needs to be a closed loop.
Right
now it's not.
Right. We have inputs, we have outputs, and in the meantime, it's an industrial, you know, perspective. You put in, you put out. You know, who cares what the soil needs?
Right. So a solution to this.
A solution to this is understanding the system, understanding that, okay, when I plant this seed, it's going to pull nutrients out of the soil, it's going to create food, not stuff that looks like food and tastes like food.
Sure.
Now, we've talked about that, you know, vibrant, vital, nutritious quality of food.
And doesn't the quality of the food that's produced depend a lot on what soil it's growing in?
Absolutely.
Right.
The soil is the medium of the plant.
Right.
Now, humans are a microcosm. Plants are a part of a macrocosm. And so what I mean by that is that we breathe, we have a heart that pumps blood, we walk, we eat, we digest the food. And so there's all these different processes that are happening within each individual. Right. Plants are part of a macrocosm. They are the lungs of the world. In the soil, there's microorganisms and insect life that act as the stomach and the intestines to digest the food. And so they are a really critical element in making sure that the plants get what they need. So there's a difference between a plant that, you know, has nitrogen available to it and has good soil humus, which is what we would call when there's microorganisms in the soil breaking down organic matter into humus, and that makes that nitrogen accessible to the plants.
Okay.
So, in other words, when we spray, like, you know, tons literally tons of nitrogen on a crop. You know, only a small percentage of that is getting to the plant because it's a chemical form of it. Right. Now, some people, you know, talk about how, well, everything's chemicals, right? But there is a difference between a chemical form, an inorganic form, a organic form, a biological form.
Yeah.
So what the soil microorganisms do is make that organic matter in your soil, your compost, or whatever it is you're putting down, into food for the plants.
Makes sense.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah. So, you know, a plant needs nitrogen, right? Or
yeah.
it needs fiber, or whatever it needs. You know, we need fiber, or we need this and that. You know, when we think of fiber, we think of an apple. We don't think of, well, paper. That's good fiber. We should eat that.
Right.
It's the same difference.
Okay. So you talk about doing this down from the micro, just from the home, to the macro. Mm-hmm. So as far as you see things, when concerning the macro, when we've got these vast, you know, areas that have been, you know, cropped for, that have been farmed for 100 years now, and the you know, the soil is nutritionless essentially. We give that soil, we need to give all that soil a break and let it regenerate. Whoever knows, you know, however long it's determined that needs to be. So in the meantime, we get our food from where?
Well, first of all, we don't necessarily have to give it a complete break.
Got it.
Okay, there's a guy named Joel Salatin. A lot of people are probably familiar with him. He's written a lot of books. He has an incredible farm. If you saw Food Inc., the guy who did that, Michael Pollan, he's good friends with Joel Salatin. Cool. His farm's called Polyface Farms.
Yeah, and I remember him. He was in the movie.
Yes. Okay, so if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about.
He's the pig man. Come here, pig.
Yeah, exactly. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
And he understands. He understands that, you know, when you have 500 acres, he came onto that, it was completely depleted.
Got it.
Well, his grandfather came onto that. It was completely depleted. And over 2 generations, a relatively short time in, you know, geological Earth time.
Yeah.
2 generations, very quick. They turned it into, you know, a paradise of what the vision of what the land would have looked like when the settlers first came to America.
And he did this through intelligent farming. Basically, he studied the land. He knew what crops would do well, would speed up the regeneration process. Something like this?
Something like that. Yeah. And this is where we really get into the system aspect of it too. Because if you asked him, what do you farm? You know, well, I'm a rye farmer, or I farm, you know, lettuce, or whatever it is. I'm a bee farmer, you know, I'm a rancher. You know, he says he's a grass farmer because that is the main medium for all the different biological activities going on in his land.
Really?
Yes. It seems kind of counterintuitive, but what's happening is the grass is turning that sunlight, the ultimate free energy, into food for animals, and he has an animal grazing system. It's called intensive cell grazing, or I forget the other words for it. But what he does is he has a big block of cattle with electric fence around it, and then he moves it from space to space. So what happens is that it's a very intensive you know, influx of cattle. They eat all the grass down, and there's so many processes that go on here. I don't want to get into all of them, but basically he moves it every day, and it simulates what the cattle would have done in a natural system.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we think about America when we first came here, there were hundreds of thousands, millions of bison. So when they moved through an area, they tore everything up.
Right.
And they ate, and they defecated, and they processed all this. They churned the soil.
Churned the soil,
you know, and then suddenly they were gone. Yeah. And then the birds came in.
Right.
And ate all the grubs that lived in the manure that they left behind.
Right.
Strange that you would decide